Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi Ling, how are you?
Hi Puji, I'm good. How are you?
Great, thanks.
Good to know.
It's nice to have you here today. You know, we already have like 24 participants.
Sure.
out of around 80 registering. So instead of waiting for them, I'd like to just start this meeting. So they can just enter this room later. Let me start. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Bapak Ibu.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih sudah hadir di acara GULALI 4. Jadi GULALI ini adalah acara rutin dari Prodi Pendidikan Bahasa Inggris Universitas Islam Indonesia yang insya Allah khusus untuk diskusi tentang buku How People Learn. Kita akan lakukan insya Allah sebulan sekali. Sebelum saya melanjutkan, Ling, I'm sorry, I have to speak in Bahasa Indonesia first, later,
that's
and then
okay.
I will get.
I heard the word empath, so I suppose there's empathy. That's about my topic, so it's all good.
Jadi kita akan berusaha untuk melaksanakan diskusi ini sebulan sekali dengan topik-topik yang ada di buku How People Learn. Maksud kami memakai buku How People Learn bukan berarti kita sangat mengkultuskan buku How People Learn, tapi hanya untuk membuat diskusi bulanan kita terstruktur. Jadi awalnya sebenarnya ini adalah sebuah reading group. So Ling, this monthly program is actually a reading group of topics on books on how people learn.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great book. Good choice. Yeah.
Thank you. Dan acara ini dilaksanakan oleh Program Studi Pendidikan Bahasa Inggris Universitas Islam Indonesia yang kami base di Yogyakarta. Kalau mungkin ada Bapak Ibu yang masih belum mendengar Universitas Islam Indonesia. Jadi Universitas Islam Indonesia adalah universitas nasional tertua di Indonesia, sedangkan Prodi Pendidikan Bahasa Inggris baru mulai programnya di tahun 2015. Di Prodi Pendidikan Bahasa Inggris Universitas Islam Indonesia ini kita membekali mahasiswa untuk mampu mengajar bahasa Inggris dengan keunggulan teknologi. Jadi pengajaran bahasa Inggris berbasis teknologi. Jadi alhamdulillah alumni kami saat ada pandemi corona atau COVID-19 sekarang yang harus mengajar secara online, alhamdulillah mereka tidak gagap begitu. Jadi karena sudah terbiasa dengan pembelajaran itu. Baik. Kalau Bapak Ibu lihat di sini ada poll. Mungkin boleh diisi poll dulu. Apakah Bapak Ibu sudah membaca bab 4 tentang how children learn yang ada di bahan. Kemudian apakah Bapak Ibu sudah membaca See, Touch, and Feel, Enhancing Young Children's Empathy Learning Through a Tablet Game. That's Ling's article. Oke, nanti kita akan lihat pollnya di mendekati penghujung acara ini. Baik, Bapak Ibu, kalau kalau ada pertanyaan tentang apa yang disampaikan Ling nanti, boleh disampaikan dulu di chat. Nanti kita akan sampaikan ke Ling di sekitar ke menit 10.35 gitu. Ling, we're going to start to listen to your speech or your research, and you will have around 30 minutes to share your research, and after that, we're going to have a Q&A session.
Sure.
Okay.
Should I start now?
Yes, you can.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ling. I'm currently working as a postdoc at Monash University Action Lab. So I'm part of the faculty of IT, but my PhD research, as I'm sure Puji has introduced, because I have very limited comprehension of Indonesian, I suppose that she's done a good introduction of my work, because we work together in the same lab for a few years, which is always the most rewarding thing, that you get to do the degree and really get to know people really well. So we're able to become friends as well. So my research, I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see my slides, hopefully. Okay. Can we all see okay?
Yeah, it's okay here. That's perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect. Okay. So as I said, this work, particularly about empathy and how children learn empathy, is developed at Sydney University. Therefore, I'm using a background of Sydney University, but I'm currently located in Monash. I think somebody mute themselves. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so just an overview of today's presentation, because Puji told me that you're doing a reading group, type of discussion about how children learn, or how people learn in general. So I try to stay with relatively high level explanation of empathy and empathy development in young children and empathy education in general. So what I'm going to cover today is, first and foremost, why empathy? Why is empathy so valuable to get to know more about? And then the second topic is, what is empathy really? Empathy is one of those things that people think we all know what empathy is. But in a scientific point of view, I suppose, empathy actually means a very complex suite of concepts. And then the third topic is how empathy develops, particularly in young children, but throughout the lifespan as well. And then the last point I want and wish to make is the identification and recognition of some of the limitations of empathy, because when people talk about empathy, they think empathy is a magic wand, it's all positive. Whereas in scientific literature, it's not necessarily the case. Okay, so I'd like to start my whole presentation by referring to a very influential book. It was published just 10 years ago by a leading world expert on primates. And his name is Frans de Waal, and the book is The Age of Empathy. It's one of my all-time favorite books. It puts empathy in a societal level, at a societal level, and in human society, and then, but his work is mainly derived from animals, but he does talk about empathy in humans as well, making the link between multiple species. And then, as you could see, okay, sorry about this bit. So this is where I met him in Paris. So I see my smile. I was just a fangirl meeting him. So with this book, he put forward a evolutionary perspective on empathy that is he argued for a, I guess at the time, relatively controversial view of empathy, because in the 1980s, especially one of the movies were out talking about empathy in a way, saying that the evolutionary spirit of human beings is actually greed. So in the movie, some of you have seen it, he was making the point, he said, the point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right, greed works, greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of evolutionary spirit. Although it somehow captures the very competitive nature of the society at the point, but the evolutionary spirit in from Dwell's point of view, and myself as well, I think is bridged too far. Because if we think about how humans survive, and then although there are extensive discussions about natural selection, about how the survival of the fittest is a result of the selfish gene that actually promotes greed. But looking at Franz Boas' work, you will realize it's really far away from the case, because if we look at humans and then we look at ourselves on an evolutionary scale, look at ourselves as a species, our ancestors may have been higher on the food chain, and we're talking about the whole food chain in the evolutionary, but they definitely were not at the apex, which means they're not really high. It's not they were like lions or tigers. There's a few enemies for them. They did have a lot of threats, actually. So they had to watch their backs. And then how did they survive then? As you probably know, that we as humans, we live in groups, and we're classified as group living animals. We live in relationships, families, and communities. We engage in cooperative activities daily, if not every single second. And we care for each other, and we especially care for those in need, and often voluntarily help them. We also try to be in tune with others, and that's why you see, if you watch good friends talking, they are basically empathy best as play, because you will see their body language sort of sync, and they smile at the same time, they talk to each other in a very empathic way. So then how do we do this all? In his book, he argued, we do this all through empathy, because if you think about the human brain, right, it's locked in this dark skull, the brain can't see anything, and then so we do this all through empathy. Empathy provides access to our foreign self. Say, for example, Puji and I can say that Puji and I were good friends, and then Puji's, as a person, she's very empathetic, and a lot of the times I don't have to explain myself so well, and then she will understand. And of course, she is my social other as well, because we've gone through the doing a PhD. At times it was exciting, but at times I just wish it was over. I'm not sure if you agree, Puji. So now I'm going to share a little bit of a video of Franz de Waal, who's one of my favorite, my scientific hero, really, explaining the topic of empathy.
Empathy is defined as that you're sensitive to the emotions and situations. And without it, you would have basically a society of psychopaths. Because you would only care about yourself. And in societies, empathy is absolutely essential for everything. People have prejudices. And so one of them is that animals may have emotions, but they are extremely simple, like fear and anger. Not something like forgiveness, work like empathy or fairness or reciprocity. People were not ready to believe that kind of the emotional life in animals, because animals are sort of little machines. You cannot have that complexity. I have studied empathy in chimpanzees, even the very old female in our group, her name is Penny. She could barely walk anymore. And each time she would get walking through the water spigot, drink, we noticed that younger female would and then come back to her, and she opens her eyes wide, and the younger female spits water into her mouth, and then she doesn't go that way to the water spigot. Or there would be situations where Penny would try to climb into a climbing structure, and everyone was sitting and cooling. She could have climbed. The younger female go underneath her and push her because of the climbing. So all the return. Certainly Penny got in a situation to return favors. I'm reluctant to go directly from, let's say, how chimpanzees behave, how humans should behave. That is a sort of very tricky question. But as an implication in the sense that pessimistically states that we humans are made for aggression and made for warfare and sort of they are completely wrong. We humans have this family background. We have an enormous potential for being nasty and aggressive, but we have an enormous potential for peace and peaceful relationships.
So that's first of all explaining what is empathy and why is empathy very important for our society. So I guess our next topic is empathy from a human development perspective. We talked about empathy at an evolutionary, and that's millions of years of change. But in human species, in our own lifespan, and although our lives look so long as well, but compared with evolutionary history, it's just a flash of light, basically. But in our human development, in our lifelong development, empathy actually changes. So, and then empathy has very specific developmental benefits. This is especially for young children, and for developing population, I guess that's young people as well. But also recent research has proven that empathy has developmental benefits for even adults as well, because research has shown that people who are more empathetic are more likely and easily to connect with others. So then in the process of connecting with others, they get help themselves as well. So that's in adults. But now if we focus on children, so empathy is certainly a building block for moral development. So moral development includes, you know, their sense of morality, what's good or bad, what's right or wrong, or things like that. Of course, morality is not limited to good or bad, right or wrong, but moral development can be summarized with our moral sense, what we value, and then at times what we discard, for example. And then for young children, a key factor, empathy is also a key factor for effective interpersonal and emotional understanding. So with empathy, children are able to interact with others at an emotional and cognitive level. And then empathy is also a motivating factor for prosocial behavior and altruism. So if we talk about generosity, helping, sharing, all these prosocial behaviors, or altruism, that is giving help to others, empathy is certainly one of the motivating factors. And then, of course, empathy also promotes caring. And sometimes, especially in today's society, people often associate empathy with caring and even mistaken caring as empathy. Another point is empathy functions as a regulative factor. This is quite important because children who are highly empathetic, or they have a good sense of empathy, it can prevent them from aggression, anxiety, and depression later on in their life as well. So empathy is quite useful developmentally. And then according to well-established established research, empathy development actually happens in early childhood. So young children, they develop empathy fairly rapidly. And then, of course, in adulthood, we still develop our empathy as well. If you observe people around you and you can tell, oh, okay, this person might need to do some learning of empathy. And it's almost guaranteed that for adults to learn empathy, the process is not as rapid as young children. Therefore, it's very important to target at the early years as a rapid period and critical period for empathy development. So now we talked a little bit about empathy learning in very young children. We're going to move on briefly, talk about empathy in educational pedagogies. So teachers' empathy is actually one of the topics of empathy education. So then researchers have done, not extensive, there's a small body of research to articulate that teachers' empathy can help with their ability to understand and identify students and children's feelings and perspectives. And this way, they're better able to communicate with the children. And then another point about empathy in educational context is a very important context, that is the caring and empathic, the value perspective of empathy. That is, empathy can also result in academic performance in young learners as well. I guess this might be a little bit remote for some people, but if you think about children learning, right, they're learning with their educators, their parents, or their teachers, and they need to empathize with us as adults as well. So then they're able to, or better, comprehend what our goal is for this interaction, or what we're trying to let them know, or let them understand, for example. So then I guess if you remember Robin Williams' role in this movie, I forgot the movie's name, I'm very sorry, but it's a very popular and famous movie. And he was a really good teacher, and he was also very, very empathic. Something about poem, just, I'm sure some of you know. If you remember the movie's name, please pop in the chat so that other people who haven't watched the movie can check it out. I highly recommend it.
Is it Dead Poet Society?
Yes, 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 exactly. That poem, Poet Society. Thank you so much, Pujit. And then physicians' empathy, of course, is another area of educational effort in empathy, because physicians, as doctors and even nurses and people in the general medical service system, empathy education, actually lots of research is happening in that space, because these people, they need empathy as part of their professional practice. So as teachers, but in terms of research, that is to less of a degree. So these are the empathy in students' voice, and some part of this presentation is actually in year 1 undergrad student degree at University of Sydney, part of the presentation. So then these are the, I guess, values generated by these students. So they input what they think are the most important things for them, becoming, some of them will become, some of them are in science major, some of them are in education, they're from very diverse discipline groups and backgrounds. But as you could see, empathy and compassion. Compassion is a concept that is very closely related to empathy. As you could see in the students, this is just students' own voice. And then you can tell that students have a focus on empathy as well. So then we'll quickly move on to talking about what is empathy. So from a scientific term, empathy is defined as an affective, that is more emotional response that stems from the comprehension and comprehension that's more cognitive of another's emotional state or conditions, and is similar to what the other person is feeling or would be expected to feel in a given situation. So basically it means it's our responsive emotions in in response to others' emotional state. And then when you empathize with others, your emotional state is getting ever closer to the other person rather than centered around yourself. One interesting thing about empathy and sympathy is sometimes people get empathy and sympathy mixed up, but empathy and sympathy are actually very different, because sympathy is more, I guess, outcome driven, whereas empathy is more process driven. I'll explain this a little bit. So empathy is a process by which we gather information about someone else. So we forever try to understand them more and understand them a bit more, like ever increasingly collecting information about another person. Whereas sympathy, in contrast, reflects concerns about the other person and the desire to improve their situation. So then, as you could see from the definition, empathy is more about me being with you, whereas sympathy is more about let me help you. What I can do for you. And then with this, I guess we need to be mindful that is what we think other people might need help may not be the case. And sometimes offering sympathy and trying to improve others' situation might not be the best solution, because at the end of the day, we use our empathy, but we're not the other person. So I guess this is something we want to think more deeply about, especially in an educational profession. And sometimes we think we know our students so well, and then we want to help them. But a lot of the times, do we also need to think about, did we empathize with them enough to make that conclusion, I guess. So empathy is often, again, this goes back to the research literature, defined as emotional empathy or affective empathy, or cognitive empathy. So of course, emotional empathy is more of the emotional response, whereas cognitive empathy is the cognitive capacity or skills to understand others' emotional states. So sometimes you understand it, but you don't feel it, and that's cognitive empathy. But increasingly now, research has proven that empathy, the emotional and cognitive aspects of empathy, they're actually blended. So then I guess I would just briefly go through this concept that is perception action mechanism. And then this mechanism captures the selection of contextual variables of human empathy, because we don't empathize with others just watching their faces. We don't do that. We actually refer to the social context very much. And then the configuration of the perceived cues. Say, for example, they're showing a very calm face, but they're talking about something very difficult for them. And then the deep breathing somebody comes through will have very different meanings to us to configure the situation, for example. And then the actions, of course, we want to take in terms of getting more information or becoming empathically concerned or offering other behavioral outcomes. So the empathic brain, because my research touches a lot on brain science or neuroscience, but I'm just going to walk you through very briefly. So the approach that I've taken with my PhD research is, because for empathy research, especially when introduced to educational context, many teachers, they do empathy education, but sometimes they focus on the behavior. Say, for example, when you see your friend cry, you should do this and you need to do that. You don't do that because they will upset someone. So they are all behavior that is of focus. Whereas the approach that I've taken in my PhD is a bottom-up approach. That is how the child perceives or notices or sees what's happening. And then they make their own decision, because there's so much process going on beneath what we could see, really beneath behavior at the brain level especially. Then the approach is a bottom-up approach, where we immerse children in different stories so they learn about empathy in an immersive kind of way. And then the top-down, of course, is to explain certain things to children, so they have the experience-driven empathic educational learning. And then they also have the very explicitly taught way of learning empathy. And then, so again, I will skip through this anatomy bit, but if some of you are interested, the brain anatomy of empathy shows very deeply that in human brain, and as you could see, this very deep structure, they are much, much older than human race as a species, I would say. So then you could see, and the blue bits are actually, we could say more unique to human, because especially this bit, they're very complex cognitive processes involved. But as you could see, empathy is very much of an ancient phenomenon that humans enjoy, but it actually was passed down in evolutionary scale. So now we're going to move to this as well. If you're interested, you can look up Frans de Waal's work, and he explains very well how empathy evolves in evolutionary time. And it's brilliant work. You could see empathy actually develops, as I have discussed at the beginning of this presentation. It has developed not only at a human lifespan time scale, it also evolves during the whole evolutionary history. And then now we're ready to move on to how exactly empathy develops in very young children. So as you could see, of the first arrow, it's called affective arousal. So that's emotional arousal. When children see something, they have a response. And then this is believed to be function at birth. So children are more or less born with it, thanks to, again, the rich and very long evolutionary scale development. And then emotion understanding. And this bit is where children understand what is sad, what is happy. And these are the two emotions. You will see them articulating more, especially when they're 2-3 years old. That's probably the only two emotions that they know, and they say it a lot. But later on, they develop more nuanced understanding of emotions. And then the emotion regulation, again, it develops right through adolescence into early adulthood. And then if you observe, again, people very carefully, you could tell that, you know, we learn about emotion regulation all our life. For example, myself, I live in Melbourne, which is part of Victoria. And then we had 3 lockdowns in a row. And then I realized I thought my emotion regulation was functioning quite well until I was locked down for, I don't even remember how many months. And then you realize there's so much going on with emotion regulation. So empathy is the same. If we want to effectively empathize with someone, we have to be able to regulate our own emotions. For example, if I see Puji being too sad, and then I am even more sad than her, I won't be able to offer anything or be effective socially. So then the emotion regulation is very important when you're trying to empathize with others. And then, as shown in this image, affective arousal, emotion understanding, and emotion regulation, they all start in the very early years, and then it builds the foundation for empathy development well into adulthood. So again, this is anatomy and different brain areas and functions that is involved with empathy. So then how empathy develops in developmental time, that is at a behavioral level, as we just explained, affective components, emotion sharing, mirroring and arousal develops early in our life. And then understanding of emotion develops slightly later in, I'd say, preschool years, so around 36 months. And then regulative component, it develops well into adolescence and even early adulthood. And then it's worthwhile to note that difficulties in developing emotion regulation can lead to compromised social ability. For example, one of the examples I used was my ability to empathize with Puji. And the other example is when we talk about children's challenging behavior, especially young people's challenging behavior in school context or bullying, a lot of the times it's a result of underdeveloped emotion regulation. So I like this quote quite much. It says, the fact that human beings are naturally equipped to feel what others feel does not mean that they always do so. They might just turn away and seem different. So, and this is very important to make, that is, empathy does not fix everything. Most of us have empathy to some degree, but from empathy to fully understand others and offering a helping hand, there's much more learning involved. And that leads to the final point of this presentation, that is the flip side of empathy. Empathy, as we said earlier, in evolutionary scale, as group living animals, we develop empathy. And then, so empathy has this in-group and out-of-group bias. If you're the same to me, if you're similar to me, I automatically feel that I can connect with you. But if you're the other, then, you know, we see so much hostility going on in different social groups, for example. A lot of the times, it's based on the similarity and familiarity bias. We assume that people who are similar with us are worth more because of the group living situation. But as contemporary human beings, of course, we've already moved on from that type of structure. But for the very ancient sense of empathy to develop, we need a very strong sense of awareness. And then, of course, as a result of similarity and familiarity bias, there's the us against them mentality. As you could see, there's so much going on in the States, so much movement about Black Lives Matter. And you imagine people in the same country having conflicts, and they're between country conflicts, and then sometimes racism, they're all part of this notion. The last one is difficulties in empathizing with abstract concepts. So, for example, sometimes we say, oh, somewhere in the world, so many people are affected and this and that. We find it very hard to empathize with abstract statistics. Also, we find it hard to empathize with something that is not immediate to us. Say, for example, climate change. And you see lots of people, we're all fully aware that climate change is happening, but how do we get people to empathize something that is not immediate to us? So these are all the work that we can do and use when we're building a greater sense of empathy and bring difference to the world. I guess the last point I wish to make is that we pay attention to empathy, and then we talk about empathy not just because they're useful. It is also because that with empathy we can connect to people next to us regardless of their cultural background, and then we're maybe less likely to be brainwashed by so much media input, for example, going on, and then that encourages polarism or things like that. So I guess I want to end the presentation at this point. That is, how are you going to cultivate empathy within yourself? As I said earlier, empathy develops across the lifespan and within the students that you have crossed paths with, and then within your family, even within your social network and all the rest. So that will be all for my presentation. Thank you very much, everyone. And then now let's get started with Q&A. I'll just stop sharing my screen. Yeah, Puji? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ling.
Pleasure.
Yes, we've got some questions here.
Sure.
Wait. Let me start from Christian.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a question.
Yeah.
If you assume, do you want to read it by yourself or I read it for you?
Oh, I don't mind. You can read it. Or Christian, she can read it if she wants.
Okay,
don't know.
Christian, Pak Christian, please. Hello.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Okay. Oh, wait. I think I'm also a fan of Frans de Waal, actually, with his work on Bonobo. So I think because I have watched his talk a couple of times in Bonobo, how we can have also empathy, even animals have empathy as well. So
Yeah.
in my assumption is that empathy is something evolutionary. I mean, it can develop through times. If that is the case, then it would be hard to teach it. I mean, because I forgot who said that empathy is caught. Children learn it from seeing, doing it. You cannot like talk about it. It's more something that they do. They will learn it. So is it hard to teach then if we assume in that way? So that is the first question. The second question is, empathy is also about emotions. If someone can deal or regulate his emotions, I think someone also, I forgot the name of an article I read, is that emotion is the foundation of empathy. Is it true, and how it could be like that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, Christian. I guess to respond to your first question, yes, empathy has an evolutionary root, but we all know, and Frans de Waal knows as well, even though he thinks bonobos are the most empathic animal that is more than humans, which is a very interesting point. But we all know that human empathy, even he acknowledges the complexity of human empathy is very different from that of our close relatives, that is chimpanzees or bonobos, for example, because we have the powerful tool that is language, and we can communicate emotionally, and then many other animals can't do. And then with the powerful tool of language and other we call it higher cognitive processes. So we humans, we can be made aware of our own empathy, like even with adults, for example. And then when we talk about bias, for example, right, especially racial bias, we can judge someone that we don't even know sometimes just because media has said so and this and that. So then I guess there's so much room for learning empathy. But I really appreciate your question about young children. Then how do we teach empathy? I guess, like you said, empathy is taught in a way that is, empathy is passed on through our day in, day out interaction. But we can also do some degrees of explicit teaching about empathy. That is, we encourage children to pay attention to others more, and we encourage children to pay attention to their own emotions more as well. So then they have a first-hand experience of how it felt, say, for example, to be socially excluded, how it felt to be bullied, or how it felt to be judged when somebody doesn't really know them, for example. And there are so many ways that we can instill empathy in a more explicitly explained way. But also, yes, and it's without a doubt that the day in, day out interaction is vitally important for empathy development. And then I guess for your second question, both emotion is a very, very fundamental component of empathy. We could say that without emotion, empathy would not exist, even though sometimes we argue that, oh, there is cognitive empathy. Yes, there is cognitive empathy, but to cognitively understand someone's emotional state, we have a hint of emotions that we have experienced growing up, which make up for the cognitive understanding. So then, yes, emotion is a very important aspect. And then emotion that is experienced within oneself is also a very important building block for empathy later on in our lives as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Christian.
Okay, thank you, Pak Christian. Terima kasih. Sekarang, now we are going to the next question from Mas Arjo, please.
Yeah, I believe I posted my question on chat, right?
You did.
To give probably to give a little background, since the topics of today is empathy, it's about I would say the next stage, but probably it needs to be nurtured through supporting environment, and one of those, not just one of the few aspects of nurturing environment, which is what I mentioned in my chat, that children looks for activities that can engage their mind in something fun, exciting, interesting, and funny. So, and a lot of parents, especially with the young people with this busy life, they don't really understand the importance of this element. So, what's the idea, or maybe you can suggest something that maybe they have to step up or something? But obviously, if somebody don't really have enough background to see what the parent did to them when the parent raised them up, then maybe they don't have an example of how you exactly to do to create such environment. So is there any quick tips for people that can just at least starting to create the environment? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mas Arjo.
Thank you very much, Arjo, for your question. It's a really important question. Actually, some of my current work touches on that. That is, how do we support parents who are incredibly busy to engage in empathic parenting or empathic education for their young children? I guess I wouldn't encourage for chase, for quick fix, because as a developmental scientist or child developmentalist, I'm personally against quick fix, but I can provide some ideas about daily activities that we can do. As we all know, and some of you are parents, I'm less qualified to say this because I'm not a parent, but some of you who are parents, you will know that what you do every day consistently matters the most. Say, for example, one of the ideas that you can use is when they watch something, especially those Disney movies or cartoons or something like that, there are different moments you can get in, and then you ask them question, why are they fighting? As if you're really curious about what's happening in the movie, and then we're more curious about what's in our own children's head, because they will tell you that, he was beating him up, and I really like it, for example. Then you will know, okay, so maybe loving someone, beating someone else up is not something so great. So then you can step in and say, how do you think the little, whatever the character is, who has been beaten up would feel? And then you have this embodied emotion to demonstrate to them. Maybe they felt pain. Maybe it's not a very pleasant thing. And then also through conversations like this, you will get much better ideas about your children, about how they see the world, how they see other people interact. That would certainly have influence on how they would interact with others. So if you're busy, try to schedule some time, or when they're watching something, just drop in from time to time. And then we're trying to develop a technology that would engage parents in doing this as well. So I'm hoping that in some time I'll inform Puji saying that, this technology is available. Feel free to use it. I hope it helps, Arjo. Thank you very much for your question.
All right. Yeah. So it takes a village to what is it, to raise a child or to educate children. So
Yeah.
it's impossible to be only within the family itself. Now let's go to the next question. That's a short question from Ibu Rohayati. That's about critical period.
Yes.
Bu Rohayati, Ibu Titi Rohayati, do you want to speak to Ling or we just read it here?
Okay, can you
Yeah,
listen to
perfectly.
me?
Yes.
Okay, I want to know because in the child time there is a critical period that do you think that it is important to educate them about empathy, because you know empathy is not just important to teach it, but you know that the teacher also have to give the examples as children like to imitate. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess this feeds back to our very first question. That is, empathy was, like Christian was saying, empathy was caught in a way that is, they do observe and they imitate a great deal of what we do as adults. And that's certainly one way they learn. And then with critical period, I guess from a developmental point of view in general, for example, critical period would mean that in this period, it's important to learn certain things, and then the development or learning will happen more rapidly. For example, language, I'm sure some of you or all of you are all language experts, and we know that the critical period for language learning is very young, but it doesn't mean that we can't learn language later on. It just means there's much more effort needed and then much more practice needed, for example. And then maybe for someone who learns English in their adulthood, it's very hard to achieve a native level proficiency, for example. I guess empathy is similar but different in a way as well. That is because there's no native standard for empathy, really. And then empathy levels for different people would differ, because some children, they are highly social and they're very good at connecting with others. But then sometimes they're not very good at developing, say, for example, in-depth relationships. So they have very different developmental needs that we need to respect. But yes, young children when they're young, it is good to expose children to very emotionally salient experience from time to time through talking or just watching or observing certain things as well. So, and then they learn in various ways. I'm sure reading through the book, you will realize children, they are the best learners of this whole planet. And then by children, I meant, I guess, cubs as well in animal kingdom. So when we're young, learning happens so rapidly. And then we learn a great deal every single day. So then that's about to treasure that period of time and then to facilitate learning as much as we do.
Thank you, Ling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oji, are you muted or I've lost my sound?
Okay,
No,
so it's about this. Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you very much, Ibu Titi and Ling, for the answer. So it's about critical period. Yeah. It doesn't mean that when we are adult, then we cannot learn. Yeah. Okay, now let's come to the next question. That's from Rif Aminuddin. Bapak Rif atau Ibu Rif nggak ini?
Iya, Bapak Rif Aminuddin.
Oke, Pak Rif, monggo.
Yeah. Actually, I've already written my question on the post, but it's about how empathy relates to culture. I mean, is just according to my layman's assumption that a different culture shows their empathies or sympathies in different ways. I mean, in a particular culture, the people tend to show their empathy in different ways with those people from different cultures. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's just based on my layman's assumption, but I mean, it's quite interesting, in my opinion, that when we want to teach by integrating empathy in our classroom, which values should we take if we assume that different culture has different ways to show that empathy or sympathy. So that's just my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruth. That's a very good question. I guess cultural differences definitely is an important aspect to look at when we talk about empathy. Because if we look at emotional expression, for example, in different cultures, and then there are differences. Say, for example, we have stereotypical perception that the French are more emotional, for example. And then the English or the Chinese, for example, I am Chinese, are less emotional, for example. But it's not necessarily true, I would argue, because when we look at culture, yes, it summarizes I guess, a threshold of tendencies or possibilities, but people are people. And individual differences are still there, right? Even within the same culture, people are very different. Within the same culture, if I bring another person who is also Chinese, then she or he would be very different from my emotional expressions and my empathy, for example. And then I would argue that emotion expressions, especially the reason why emotion existed and then survived through the evolutionary history, is because emotion is kind of a universal language for human beings. If we meet someone from a completely different culture, we don't even speak the same language. If the person is sad or excited, you would know. You would somehow understand. Yes, of course, there are different nuances and all the rest of it, but there are similarities. But also there are differences, especially with cultural differences or the definition of cultural groups. When we are one group and they are another group, and that's the us against them that started to formulate, that's where we need to bridge the differences with the similarities and to recognize the beauty of human nature, cross-border, cross-language, cross everything. So then to recognize that empathy is about connecting with one another. It's about feeling what you're feeling willingly. Of course, I won't be able to understand the whole I guess, complexity of your emotion because we don't speak the same language, for example, but it doesn't mean that we can't connect. I guess the value that we can instill in children is that at the end of the day, if we look from the space, our home is this tiny little blue marble. And the whole human race is on this tiny little blue marble. How different can we be? No matter how the media and everything was trying to tell us, but that's our home. We have the same home. How different can we possibly be? So I guess a lot of the times it's about seeing the similarity in differences and really encouraging the curiosity, especially in children. We can just be curious about another person and withhold our judgment, because as soon as you judge, as soon as we make our own judgment, the connection is somehow lessened or not even there anymore. So I guess the curiosity mindset and then to getting to know someone else, chances are if you really get to know someone, you will see similarities in your humanity, I suppose. It's my personal opinion.
Okay. Do you want to continue asking, Pak Arif?
Just a bit. I mean, so intercultural understanding, intercultural differences should be emphasized in. I mean, in my context, I'm a teacher, so I'm concluding from your statement that intercultural understanding should be emphasized in our teaching in the classroom. Is that right?
Yeah, and or just say that let's just get to know each other. That's all.
Yeah.
You know, get to know each other, share your culture, share your language, and let's just get to know another person. We
Thank
lived in very different environments, but let's get to know each other. I guess that's the part of the very beauty of human experience, especially when you travel around. Why we travel, right? We're trying to get to know another culture, another group of people, how they live as well. So yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ling. We still have 5 minutes. If someone else or if another participant will ask a question, please do. You just unmute yourself and then let's see who's speaking.
I noticed that there's a question in the chat.
Oh, is there still a question?
That's a direct message.
Oh, to Ling. Okay, so you can read that.
Okay. I will. If I could please ask everyone, Puji, if you have individual questions, because I don't know how to contact you guys. If you could please, I'll just leave my email here. So then please feel free to drop me an email. And then I will attend to your question. Like that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's a direct message to me. Is it okay to share your email address?
Oh, is that a direct? Sorry.
I'll make it to everyone, Ling. Don't worry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Puji.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Bapak Ibu, if you don't have more questions in this meeting, well, feel free to ask Ling via her email address. Well, things about empathy, because this is her very interest in research. And even you remember last time we talked about having a like research collaboration or something like that, aiming at developing empathy skills among young children that, well, we might just follow it up later, perhaps in 2021 or 2022. And it's not only from us UII, which can involve, but I will also invite some other universities if you are interested in carrying out research, like perhaps a community action research or something like that to develop empathy. Because Ling has developed an application and tablet. Do you still continue developing it, or was it?
Yeah, we are, but it's updating in a way that a lot of the functionalities I wasn't able to cover in my PhD, because now I work with a lab of like experts of technology. So then we're extending it, like I said earlier, we're really developing this technology into something that we can support educators, and that's teachers and early childhood educators and in different educational contexts, and then parents as well. So we're broadening the angle and extending it. So then our goal is to really empower parents, because we do recognize very much parents and educators' own expertise. we do believe that if you are an educator, if you are a parent, we do believe in your expertise. Then the technology is to leverage that expertise in terms of educating their children's related to empathy development, of course. But that's a piece of technology that we're still in development. But yeah,
Okay, so let's see what we can do. Okay,
yeah,
and
exactly.
if you have seen how Ling spoke in the whole presentation, she's been very enthusiastic, and yeah, that's Ling. Ling is a very enthusiastic person, especially on when she talks about empathy, and yeah, she always is like that, and she even got her job before she finished her PhD. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ling. Ling is leaving us. Yeah, like perhaps in 1 or 2 minutes. So if you still have something to say to Ling, please do. We have 1 minute. No? Okay.
Everyone, thank you very, very much for listening in. And as I said, if you have any questions or anything that you want to chat about, please feel free to email me. And then enjoy a great afternoon. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. It's
everyone.
morning in Indonesia.
Oh, is it morning? Yeah. Then have a great day. We're in the afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ling. Yeah, I'll get in touch with you later via email.
Sure. Thank you, Puji. Thank
Have
you
a nice
so much.
day. Have a nice afternoon.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Oke, Bapak Ibu, sekarang kita akan melakukan diskusi selanjutnya melalui in bahasa Indonesia tentang masih bisa tentang empathy development, tapi kita juga bisa memfokuskan lagi kepada bukan maksud saya kita bisa mendiskusikan juga di buku How People Learn tentang how children learn. Saya akan buka poll apakah Bapak Ibu sudah membaca bahan yang kita berikan beberapa hari sebelum meeting ini, nggih? Oke. Jadi monggo Bapak Ibu boleh dijawab pollnya. Saya akan tunggu mungkin sekitar 30 detik lagi. Oh ya, sambil menunggu polling, kalau Bapak Ibu mengetik nama Ling, yaitu Ling Wu, Monash University, Bapak Ibu akan directed ke laman profilnya Ling, dan di situ saya melihat ada pesan bahwa Monash University itu accepting PhD students. Kalau Bapak Ibu tertarik dengan riset tentang empathy, Bapak Ibu bisa kontak Link. Kemudian menanyakan tentang kesempatan riset tersebut. Dan Bapak Ibu, kalau Bapak Ibu tertarik untuk mengadakan riset tentang empathy development among young children, khususnya yang community based, Bapak Ibu bisa ngobrol dengan saya karena saya sendiri juga tertarik meskipun saya base-nya adalah pendidikan bahasa Inggris, tapi research interest saya adalah tentang penggunaan teknologi dalam pembelajaran. Pembelajaran di sini tidak harus pembelajaran di dalam kelas. Jadi empathy development via apps would be something that I am also interested to do. Terima kasih, poll akan saya tutup dan ternyata dari 22 peserta, apakah pollnya kelihatan di Bapak Ibu semua? Tidak, okay. Bapak Ibu boleh unmute your microphone if you want to talk. Feel free. Oke, jadi dari 22 yang menjawab, 3 diantaranya sudah membaca. Jadi, oke. Am I sharing the poll?
Yes, you are.
Oke, so jadi ya dari 22 ada 3 yang sudah membaca. Jadi Bapak Ibu perlu saya informasikan bahwa dalam acara GULALI setiap kali kita akan mengadakan GULALI, saya akan selalu membagikan bahan yang akan kita bahas di form pendaftaran. Begitu. Di form pendaftaran akan selalu ada link tentang bahan yang akan kita bahas. Dan pada diskusi hari ini kita akan membahas tentang how children learn. Dari 3 peserta yang sudah membaca, saya pengen dengar insight-nya, apa yang menarik dari bab ini. Tentang apakah anak-anak itu belajarnya, kalau saya belajarnya tidak secepat orang dewasa atau malah sebaliknya, atau apa saja yang sebenarnya bisa meningkatkan kecepatan anak-anak mempelajari sesuatu. Monggo, siapa yang akan berbagi? Saya akan stop sharing. Sambil menunggu, saya akan membaca ada apa di chat tentang buku How Children Learn bisa diperoleh di mana. Oke. Buku How Children Learn bisa diperoleh online, free. Ya. Tapi kalau Bapak Ibu mau sekedar mengikuti diskusi kita, saya akan selalu membagikan bab per bab, tidak selalu bab per bab, karena kadang-kadang kita membahas 2 bab sekaligus kalau itu ada hubungannya. Oke, ini ada note dari Ibu Suciana Wijirahayu tentang teladan dari orang tua sangat penting. Ibu Suciana, mungkin Ibu mau berbagi dengan kita? Ibu Suciana dari UHAMKA. Oke, Ibu Suci menghendaki lewat chat saja. Oke, baik. Ada Bapak Ibu yang lain yang mau berbagi atau mau berefleksi tentang how children learn atau how empathy is developed?
Ya Bu, mungkin dari saya.
Oke, Pak Rif, monggo.
Ini biar jalan diskusinya.
Iya,
Saya
terima
terus
kasih
terang Bu,
Pak
baru
Rif.
terus terang baru baca setengah Bu, cuman ada beberapa yang menarik yang saya baca di awal-awal. Kedengaran enggak Bu suara saya?
Dengar, that's perfectly okay.
Ya.
Pak Rif, boleh
ya?
share video?
Oh iya ya, harus ya.
Tidak harus sih, tapi biar Bapak Ibu melihat Pak Rif.
Ya. Ada yang beberapa hal yang menarik yang saya baca. Jadi yang pertama tentang pandangan yang sering sekali kita dengar bahwa anak itu kertas kosong, gitu, tabula rasa.
Tabula rasa, nggih?
Iya. Sementara dari pemahaman saya dari sisi linguistiknya mungkin sebenarnya pada dasarnya sebenarnya otak anak itu tidak bisa dikatakan benar-benar kertas putih juga sih sebenarnya. Kalau dari perspektif kognitif ya, kognitivism artinya misalnya dari Chomskyan linguistik misalnya, di otak manusia memang sudah pre-wired, kita sudah dibekali dengan struktur-struktur abstrak bahasa. Jadi yang lingkungan itu ketika dia sudah engage di lingkungan sosial, maka tugas lingkungan sosial itu hanya sebagai pelatuk saja untuk mengaktifkan struktur-struktur abstrak yang ada di otak anak. Jadi itu yang menarik bagi saya. Jadi sementara yang memang di banyak kalangan kita masih sering meyakini bahwa memang anak itu kertas putih, kertas kosong. Jadi apa yang dia lihat ya itu yang akan dilakukan oleh anak. Sementara dari perspektif linguistik enggak juga. Jadi otak anak itu memiliki, artinya otak manusia ya pada umumnya sangat-sangat memiliki kapabilitas yang luar biasa ya. Artinya tidak sesederhana anak melihat proses habituasi itu tidak sesederhana itu. Artinya otak anak itu tidak sesederhana melihat dan imitating gitu. Tapi dia mekanisme di otak itu memproses apa yang dia lihat untuk dia secara aksinya mungkin belum tentu akan sama seperti yang dia lihat. Artinya dari perspektif linguistiknya. Kemudian yang kedua yang menarik adalah bagaimana di sana di chapter itu dibahas juga tentang pendapat dari Jean Piaget dan Vygotsky. Dari Vygotskian itu yang menarik menurut saya, artinya bagaimana peran lingkungan sosial dan kulturnya itu sangat menentukan arahnya kemana, arah behavior si anak itu akan kemana. Meskipun di sana nanti akan tetap anak itu juga memiliki agensi sendiri. Jadi otak anak itu memproses apa yang dia lihat, tapi dia punya mekanisme tersendiri untuk menentukan bahwa apakah ini sesuai dengan apa yang saya inginkan atau tidak. Misalnya contoh itu yang saya dapat. Artinya peran lingkungan sosial hanya sebagai membantu untuk proses akselerasi belajarnya. Jadi bukan hanya sih, salah satu fungsi dari lingkungan sosialnya adalah membantu proses belajarnya saja. Jadi kemudian yang berikutnya, apakah anak saya lupa ingat sih hasil bacaan saya tadi di proses dari pertanyaan sesuai dengan pertanyaan Mbak Puji ya tadi. Apakah statement yang dipancing sama Mbak Puji, apakah anak belajar lebih cepat dari orang dewasa? Sekali lagi kembali lagi ke perspektif linguistik yang saya pahami, artinya pada beberapa aspek memang orang dewasa jauh lebih unggul dalam proses belajar, karena orang dewasa memiliki sudah terbentuk strategi metakognisinya ketika untuk belajar. Jadi metakognitif strategi dalam pembelajaran sudah terbentuk pada orang dewasa. Itu yang tidak lebih unggul dibandingkan dengan anak-anak, otak anak. Itu saja Ibu. Saya belum terlalu jauh.
Saya pengen menginvite Ibu Nur Komaria Agustina dari yang jauh-jauh dari Kent State University di Ohio. Bu Ari, silahkan. Sekarang sedang malam di sana, nggih?
Iya, sekarang malam. Sebentar ini gimana nih? Oke.
If you can share your video.
Yeah, can you listen to me? Yeah. Oke. Ini kalau di Bapak Ibu sekalian, perkenalkan saya Nur Komaria Agustina. Saya teman lamanya Mbak Puji dulu dari UNY gitu ya. Terus
Lama sekali ya.
nasib memisahkan kita Mbak Puji ke Southern Hemisphere di Australia. Saya sekarang lagi di Northern Hemisphere of the Earth. Saya sekarang lagi belajar di Kent State University, Ohio, Amerika. Kebetulan semester ini saya membaca ada beberapa literatur yang saya baca dari mata kuliah Sociology of Education itu. Tadi saya mendengarin link sambil ngantuk-ngantuk gitu ya, tapi terus sekarang bisa ini lagi.
Sekarang hampir jam 12 ya?
Iya, ini setengah 12, jam 11.23. Ya, saya tadi mendengar konsep-konsep dari simpati atau empati itu kalau di sini mereka kita menyebutnya sebagai pengajaran yang berbasis hope and healing, jadi pengharapan dan cinta begitu ya. Tapi tentu saja karena konteks di Amerika berbeda ya, karena di sini itu seperti kalau Bapak Ibu sering dengar gitu, rasisme, kemudian social class crash itu sangat tinggi sekali gitu ya, apalagi kalau misalnya kebanyakan yang bicara tentang hope and healing itu biasanya dia di urban education atau pendidikan yang berada di kota atau di kota-kota besar, karena biasanya dia tingkat kriminalitasnya tinggi. Jadi lingkungan itu tidak aman untuk anak-anak begitu ya. Jadi begitu anak-anak keluar, dia sudah mendengar suara tembakan atau mendengar orang berkelahi atau drug dealers. Itu kalau di urban di sini itu sesuatu yang, tapi di kota besar ya. Biasanya kalau di kota kecil seperti kota saya itu aman-aman saja begitu.
Oke.
Nah, tapi itu kan fenomena yang cukup banyak juga karena di sini cukup banyak kota besar di Amerika begitu. Ya pokoknya kayak situasi film di Hollywood yang settingnya geng-geng gitu-gitu ya. Itu sebenarnya di sini cukup nyata. Ada beberapa daerah di situ yang memang kondisinya seperti itu. Itu di film itu sesuatu yang nyata begitu ya. Jadi dengan kondisi seperti itu kan anak lalu menjadi punya trauma. Nah, ketika dia trauma, kemudian selalu dihadapkan pada violence atau kekerasan, maka dia di otaknya itu akan seperti ada blok gitu ya. Ya lalu jadi orang yang tidak percaya diri, ketakutan, itu semua akan menghambat proses dia dalam belajar seperti itu ya. Itu baru dilihat dari kondisi dia hidup di lingkungan sekitar gitu ya. Belum kalau misalnya dilihat dari kalau di Amerika itu misalnya banyak sekali juga para imigran yang dia refugee gitu ya, pengungsi dari negara mana lalu dia ke Amerika begitu ya. Itu biasanya mereka juga akan mengalami, anak-anak itu akan mengalami trauma karena satu dia pindah dari lingkungan culture yang sangat berbeda sekali, terutama di bahasa gitu ya. Mereka bahasanya sama sekali tidak bisa bahasa Inggris. Kemudian ketika mereka harus sekolah, mereka sudah harus dihadapkan dengan ngomong bahasa Inggris yang mereka sama sekali tidak tahu gitu ya. Padahal makanya sekarang ini ada banyak sekali pembahasan-pembahasan tentang bagaimana kita mengatakannya sebagai cultural sustaining pedagogy gitu ya. Jadi bagaimana pendidikan di sini itu bisa mengakomodir
jadi anak-anak, terutama yang anak-anak dengan non bahasanya yang bukan bahasa Inggris gitu, yang kita mengatakannya sebagai student of color gitu ya, anak-anak yang kulitnya berwarna begitu, itu biasanya
Not colorful lah.
ya itu maka kemudian diharapkan sekolah-sekolah itu bisa mengakomodir apa namanya cultural diversity mereka, identity mereka dalam bentuk culture dan bahasa seperti itu ya. Itu salah satu supaya nanti bisa anak itu bisa belajar dengan baik di sekolah seperti itu, dan ini wacana-wacana ini, diskusi seperti ini itu sudah cukup lama dan juga banyak sekali penelitian-penelitian yang ada di situ gitu ya. Jadi bahkan dari buku yang saya baca itu dia sampai kepada praktikal gitu ya, bagaimana cara kemudian menerapkan hope and healing ini. Jadi mengajar dengan cerita seperti itu ya. Kemudian yang paling penting adalah bagaimana membuat safe environment for the children. Jadi ya ini skopnya sudah bukan lagi individual tapi sudah ke environment, society, community gitu ya. Karena memang sudah cukup krisis juga terutama di kota-kota besar itu, bahwa lingkungan yang aman buat anak-anak itu kadang-kadang sesuatu yang sesuatu yang langka gitu. Terutama saya tidak bicara tentang middle class Amerika gitu ya. Biasanya itu akan pembahasan di working class, kemudian poor urban society seperti itu. Gitu. Tapi kan mereka juga banyak anak-anak di situ. Jadi saya melihat juga di sini dari simpati dan empati itu nantinya diharapkan bisa memberikan anak-anak harapan, kemudian memberikan persepsi yang baik terhadap dunia sehingga dia mempunyai optimisme untuk hidup gitu ya. Bahkan di satu buku itu ada yang jadi hidup itu tidak hanya survive gitu. Sebenarnya ada sampai saking mirisnya itu orang-orang, ada anak yang beranggapan bahwa hidup itu adalah untuk survive gitu ya. Padahal hidup itu tidak untuk survive, tapi hidup itu adalah untuk kita bisa berkarya dan seterusnya. Tapi ada banyak kenyataan yang kemudian mereka bilang, aku hidup itu hanya untuk survive gitu ya, untuk supaya tidak bisa makan besok, kemudian tidak mati besok karena ditembak atau karena perkelahian atau ditangkap polisi. Itu sesuatu yang saya pikir waktu itu cuma di film, tapi ternyata itu banyak sekali menjadi pembahasan dan menjadi perhatian para pendidik gitu ya. Yang mungkin nggak terjadi sebelumnya. Ya sedikit sharing.
Schooling di sana terutama dari sisi teacher sama school management lumayan banyak kerjaannya ya, Rik ya.
Waduh, kalau yang kayak di urban gitu ya, yang dia itu banyak sekali gitu ya. Jadi karena dia teachers itu sudah harus mulai dibekali dengan, jadi kalau misalnya teacher educator kayak UII atau UMY gitu yang mempersiapkan guru di sini itu harus dibekali dengan yang namanya social justice, cultural diversity, kemudian pemahaman tentang rasisme. Bahkan kalau di sini harus ada pemahaman juga tentang banyak sekali ya dari sisi bahkan LGBT gitu ya. Itu di sini kan bebas sekali LGBT itu. Jadi orang berhak untuk secara gender itu dia di sini ada 5 jenis gender, kalau di Indonesia cuma 2. Di sini ada 5 dan ada other. Nah, kamu boleh pilih gendermu apa.
Oke. Kebetulan kita punya Mas Aryo juga di sini yang juga tinggal di US. Mas Aryo mungkin mau berkomentar?
Soal apa ya?
Soal empathy teaching di Amerika.
Kalau yang saya tahu untuk yang sekarang ini udah lebih baik ya daripada misalkan tahun 70-an, 80-an atau awal 90-an. Secara umum udah lebih baik lah. Orang udah lebih open. Walaupun masih ada kasus-kasus kecil gitu, dan tadi seperti yang disebut juga biasanya berhubungan dengan keluarga yang miskin, tapi pada dasarnya mereka tuh bukan miskin karena tidak punya uang, mereka punya uang, tapi uangnya itu entah digunakan buat apa itu, yang biasanya cuma untuk kesenangannya masing-masing. Jadi misalkan kalau ada orang tua punya anak gitu, ya kalau misalkan mereka punya uang, ya di uangnya lebih kepada buat orang tuanya sendiri gitu. Misalkan kalau yang ibu cuman buat beli make up atau buat beli tas atau beli apa gitu, walaupun mungkin kalau dilihat sekilas itu bukan tas yang mahal atau bukan baju yang mahal, tapi setidaknya buat sang ibu atau sang bapak itu merasa dirinya kelihatan keren lah gitu istilahnya gitu. Dengan anak-anaknya dibiarkan gitu aja. Tapi juga ada special cases di mana walaupun keluarga seperti tadi dibilang keluarga miskin, tapi kemudian karena didikan orang tua jadi lebih menghargai kondisi, jadi malah berusaha untuk memperbaiki lingkungan. Kalau yang tadinya lingkungannya bukan lingkungan yang bagus, karena banyak anak-anak yang dari latar belakang golongan menengah ke bawah, tapi mereka berusaha untuk menciptakan lingkungan lebih baik gitu, sehingga ada yang walaupun keluarga miskin, nggak punya duit, nilai rapornya juga mungkin nggak terlalu bagus karena lebih sibuk dengan urusan yang di luar akademis ya, seperti yang tadi yang harus berurusan dengan lingkungan dan sebagainya, malah bisa diterima di kampus Yale, salah satu top perguruan tinggi di Amerika bahkan dunia, karena dari pihak Yale University, Yale College in this case, jadi untuk S1 itu Yale College. Jadi dari sisi ini Yale melihat bahwa walaupun anak ini nggak punya nilai yang bagus, tapi kegiatan ekstrakurikulernya dia tuh sangat bagus, dan ini perlu dijadikan contoh kasus di Yale, dan sekaligus membawa nilai-nilai yang bagus buat Yale juga. Jadi itu juga ada dari situ ya, kampus yang bagus juga memberi support gitu. Mungkin kalau di Indonesia belum terlalu umum ya, jadi lebih kepada nilai yang bagus, nilai rapor yang bagus, tapi kalau dari sisi ekstrakurikuler mungkin masih kurang di mana. Malah ada konsepsi bahwa kalau terlalu banyak ikut kegiatan ekstrakurikuler nanti malah nilai jelek, nggak keterima di kampus yang bagus. Nah, kalau di Amerika malah justru sebaliknya. Jadi tergantung situasi dan kondisi.
Malah di sini kalau di universitas jangan terlalu banyak kegiatan, nanti nggak lulus-lulus gitu ya.
Nah, kalau soal kegiatan itu ada lagi cerita sendiri. Jadi kalau misalkan kalau kita bicara soal kuliah ya, kalau di perguruan tinggi yang bagus itu lebih penekanannya kepada untuk S1 lebih kepada liberal arts. Jadi 2 tahun pertama tingkat 1, tingkat 2 itu tidak diwajibkan untuk memilih prodi. Jadi terserah mau langsung pilih prodi boleh, tapi kalau misalkan nanti mau ganti prodi atau mau malah ganti fakultas itu juga boleh. Ini terutama untuk perguruan tinggi yang besar, jadi yang punya banyak pilihan prodi dan fakultas. Jadi kalaupun udah tahu kira-kira mau di fakultas mana, tapi belum tahu prodi mana, ya nanti fakultas menyediakan undecided atau exploratory track. Jadi silahkan nyobain berbagai macam kelas, nanti tinggal dipilih mau yang sesuai yang mana setelah tahun ketiga, awal tahun ketiga, semester 5 gitu, atau paling cepat akhir semester 4 itu nanti boleh menentukan. Nah tadi, dan salah satu faktornya itu tadi dari kegiatan ekstrakurikuler tadi ya. Kalau misalkan mungkin dari segi akademik nggak terlalu menonjol, tapi mungkin anaknya atau mahasiswa waktu SMA senang olahraga, misalkan main sepak bola atau senang musik, main musik. Nah nanti mungkin waktu kuliah bisa pilih major sport management misalnya, kalau ada prodi seperti itu, atau kalau yang musik ya musik performance gitu. Jadi keuntungan kuliah di kampus yang besar, kalau tadi untuk ibu tadi yang dari Ohio, kalau saya ambil contoh mungkin Ohio State ya, karena itu salah satu flagship di Ohio. Nah kalau kayak di Ohio State tuh pilihan fakultasnya, prodinya tuh banyak, jadi enak gitu. Kalau misalkan nggak cocok satu bisa pindah yang lain. Kalau mau ganti prodi 5 kali juga nggak ada yang ngelarang. Jadi memang apa namanya, mahasiswa itu kan beda-beda ya. Ada yang memang udah merasa yakin, oh ini prodinya ini titik. Tapi ada yang harus terus mencari sampai 5 kali ganti-ganti baru nanti ketemu gitu. Atau malah nggak ketemu prodi yang cocok, bikin prodi baru juga boleh asal ada persetujuan dari pembimbing akademis. Jadi
Oke,
dengan
terima
kata
kasih.
lain kegiatan itu sangat dihargai gitu.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Mas Aryo share-nya. Saya sebenarnya juga sangat tertarik dengan tadi yang Ari sampaikan tentang teachers preparation di sana ya. Seperti apa sih sebenarnya, karena kita rely on teachers juga untuk pendidikan pendidikan dari kita. Bapak Ibu mungkin ada yang mau ikut menyampaikan insight-nya, monggo Pak Sinta, Pak Buyung, monggo.
Ya. Oke, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Jadi menyimak dan kita memperhatikan apa yang dijelaskan oleh teman-teman tadi. Ya, sebenarnya baik tentang apa tadi, simpati dan lain sebagainya. Sebenarnya kita sudah jelas ya dalam pendidikan kita, dalam tujuan pendidikan kita. Saya coba mendefinisikan pendidikan menurut undang-undang kita bahwa pendidikan itu adalah proses dan usaha sadar mengembangkan potensi warga belajar. Yang pertama adalah bersyukur. Yang kedua, beriman dan bertakwa kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Kemudian berilmu, kemudian ia memiliki skill atau kita keterampilan. Nah, tinggal definisi itu bagaimana kita implementasikan. Bahwa tadi simpati atau rasa empati itu adalah merupakan bagian daripada pendidikan halak itu sendiri sebenarnya. Ya. Nah, kalau kita sudah berakhlak sesuai dengan tadi tujuan pendidikan kita, maka insya Allah sempurnalah sudah di dalam kehidupan kita anak-anak itu. Nah, kalau kehidupan tidak itu bersyukur daripada anak itu, ya tentu akan menjadi masalah tersebut dalam dunia pendidikan khususnya di Indonesia itu. Maka salah satu yang perlu ditanamkan dalam pendidikan itu kan adalah nilai syukurnya dulu. Makanya dalam pendidikan kita ada KI 1, KI 2, KI 3, dan KI 4 semuanya dan lain sebagainya. Sehingga di dalam undang-undang kita tentang pendidikan itu sudah terangkum semua sebanyak, tinggal bagaimana diimplementasikan ya di dalam proses belajar mengajar khususnya di dalam kurikulum kita. Nah, itu yang kita implementasikan. Bagaimana menanamkan nilai syukur itu? Tentu itu adalah kebiasaan dan latihan. Ya, saya kira cukup sekian. Barangkali kita lupa dan lalai tentang bahwa kita dalam jelas dalam undang-undang pendidikan kita, apa itu pendidikan, kemudian tujuan pendidikan tadi yang sudah saya sebutkan tadi, sudah merangkum semua kok. Tinggal kita implementasikan sadar. Tapi manusia itu kapan sadar dan sadarnya walau-walau. Apa sudah tua atau bagaimana, itu usaha kita, pendidikan kita. Itu kan proses. Perlu semuanya proses. Saya kira cukup sekian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Buyung. Ada Ibu Bapak yang mau share lagi, monggo?
Saya bisa sedikit komentar dari Pak Buyung tadi.
Iya, selalu.
Itu bagus sekali Bapak, karena kalau di sini ada konsep yang namanya faith based, yang mungkin teman-teman juga sudah paham ya, faith based. Jadi berbasis pada kepercayaan begitu, keagamaan. Itu adalah salah satu yang di sini juga menjadi itu, ketika anak trauma, kemudian merasa terancam terhadap lingkungannya, itu salah satu dari volunteer yang kemudian mengembalikan mereka menjadi anak normal kembali yang bahagia, yang kemudian mau termotivasi untuk memperbaiki hidupnya, kemudian termotivasi untuk you know, have some achievement gitu ya, sukses di pendidikan itu salah satunya. Tapi banyak sekali ya, karena kalau nggak salah ada 5 cara begitu ya. Salah satunya yang saya ingat itu adalah dengan faith based itu. Jadi anak apa namanya, supaya dia bisa menjadi, kan tujuannya pendidikan juga salah satunya biar dia bisa menjadi a good citizen, bisa menjadi warga negara yang baik, bisa mengikuti aturan, menjadi orang sukses seperti itu ya. Nah, salah satu untuk menuntun dia ke situ dengan namanya faith base itu ya, yang tadi Bapak sampaikan, bersyukur, percaya kepada Tuhan, itu juga bisa menjadi salah satu yang bisa apa namanya, menjaga anak supaya dia tetap menjadi anak baik dan termotivasi untuk belajar seperti itu. Ya, ya Wak, itu bagus sekali. Ya.
Sedikit saya komentarin. Tadi yang berhubungan dengan apa yang disampaikan Ibu tadi, kalau kita lihat dari filsafat, itu dilihat dari segi manfaatnya dan segi kebaikannya begitu. Maka sehebat apapun ilmu itu, kalau tidak dibarengi dengan akhlak, dengan rasa syukur, maka tidak ada apa-apanya. Maka malah itu akan merusak menurut saya. Jadi yang perlu kita tanamkan itu kan adalah nilai dasarnya. Yang sudah jelas dalam Undang-Undang Dasar, dalam pendidikan kita dan tujuan pendidikan kita, sekarang kita sedang implementasikan dalam kurikulum 13 itu sudah jelas. Barangkali banyak guru-guru atau dosen barangkali yang belum memahami dari mana sih kita ambil, kita laksanakan kurikulum itu. Padahal itu diambil daripada pendidikan dan tujuan pendidikan yang kita akan kembangkan sekarang. Ya, bersyukur di Indonesia bahwa ditanamkan itu adalah pertama adalah nilai syukur. Maka selalu saya konsultasikan dengan orang luar itu, selalu saya sharing dengan orang-orang luar itu di Ome TV itu, khususnya kalau ketemu guru, saya selalu share dengan mereka, berbicara tentang apa sih yang membuat kita bahagia, yaitu adalah nilai syukur. Sehebat apapun tanpa nilai syukur itu susah kita dalam hidup. Mau mencari kebahagiaan dalam hidup itu kalau tidak ditanamkan nilai syukur dan keimanan itu sesuai dengan keyakinan dan kepercayaan kita masing-masing tentunya itu. Kalau kita dalam Islam ya tentu itu kewajiban kita berdoa, apapun itu kan adalah bentuk ikhtiar kita semua kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Maka di dalam kita berbuat kan jangan melihat nilai besar atau kecilnya, tapi melihat keikhlasan dan ketulusan kita, karena itu adalah tanggung jawab kita kepada Allah, kita tentu sebagai orang yang muslim. Maka disitulah kita mendapatkan kebahagiaan yang sejati, kebahagiaan yang sebenarnya itu kita berhadapan, kita meyakini bahwa itu adalah Tuhan yang berikan itu, maka itulah menurut saya itulah yang saya terapkan dalam kehidupan saya adalah nilai syukur tadi dan nilai keimanan dan kepercayaan kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala itu kita menjalani sesuai dengan ya agama kita masing-masing yang ada di Indonesia. Saya kira akan menjadi bangsa yang besar ya kalau kita pelihara dan sang pendidikan dan tujuan pendidikan itu tinggal kita implementasikan itu nilai syukur itu tadi bagaimana caranya kita implementasikan kepada anak, maka itulah bagaimana kita mengajak berdoa itu bersyukur. Bagaimana percaya tentu berdoa dan kemudian bersama-sama di dalam sekolah kita melaksanakan sholat bersama dan lain sebagainya. Supaya tertanam hal itu. Kalau tidak dibiasakan, kalau tidak dilatih, tidak akan menanamkan, tidak akan bisa dapat itu apa yang didapatkan rasa simpati dan empati tadi. Saya yakin tidak itu. Karena semuanya itu perlu proses latihan dan pembiasaan. Terutama yang berhubungan dengan nilai rasa simpati tadi. Bahwa itu semuanya masuk dalam pendidikan karakter menurut saya. Kalau dulu ada pendidikan karakter itu, saya kira. Ya, sekian dan terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Buyung.
Sama-sama.
dari tataran apa ya, tataran tinggi, tataran konseptual memang saya setuju seperti itu. Kalau kita lihat dari buku ini sebenarnya adalah bahwa kita harus yakin atau kita harus percaya bahwa anak-anak itu mereka itu sebenarnya juga problem solvers ya, problem solvers dan juga problem generators. Jadi dia create problems untuk belajar, tapi dia juga berusaha untuk memecahkan masalah mereka gitu. Jadi maksudnya bahwa kalau kita mengajarin anak-anak, ini menurut pemahaman saya ya, kita tidak selalu harus langsung memberikan solusi dari masalah-masalah mereka yang ya mungkin masalah-masalah kecil, misalnya masalah-masalah sharing, masalah-masalah yang lain-lainnya itu kita bisa tunggu sampai mereka sampai mereka berusaha untuk memecahkan masalahnya. Pak Christian, terima kasih sudah hadir. Bulan depan kita invite lagi ya. Dan kewajiban kita sebagai orang dewasa adalah memfasilitasi untuk anak-anak kita itu mengkoneksikan apa-apa yang sudah mereka pelajari dan apa-apa yang baru untuk kemudian lebih mempercepat pembelajaran mereka. Nah, saya akan sedikit membaca tentang kok sedikit membaca ya istilahnya, komentar-komentar dari teman-teman yang tertulis ini nggih. Ini dari saya kok lupa menulis namanya ya, tapi misalnya begini. Ada komen bahwa bila kita ke sekolah anak melihat dan membaca semua teks yang ada di kelas dan di seputar sekolah, maka kita akan sedikit memahami bagaimana empati dikembangkan. Apakah ini mungkin maksudnya kalau teks-teks yang di sekolah itu kurang mengembangkan empati? Kalau Ibu atau Bapak yang membuat pernyataan ini bisa berkomentar, monggo. Monggo, saya mendengar ada suara-suara. Apakah ini dari sebentar? Ini chatnya dari Bu siapa nggih? Saya kok lupa. Apakah ini dari Bu Wiji?
Empati.
Suciana, Bu Suciana. Bu Suciana, do you want to talk about this? Apakah Bu Suciana masih ada di sini? Oke, sambil menunggu kita lanjutkan tentang empathy game. Oh ya, interesting. Ya, saya melihat sendiri bagaimana Link mendevelop empathy game ini dan memakainya di dua preschool di Australia, yang itu ada di artikelnya Link ya, salah satu dari 2 artikel yang saya bagikan. Oh nggak apa-apa Bu Suciana, tidak masalah. Nanti kita akan bahas selanjutnya. Oke, jadi game ini memang masih disempurnakan, selalu disempurnakan, tapi dalam aplikasi sebelumnya itu sudah menunjukkan keberhasilannya. Dan makanya saya sempat ngobrol dengan Link untuk kemungkinan menggunakan salah satu game yang mereka develop untuk empathy development dari anak-anak kita di sini, yang basisnya adalah basis community, jadi tidak sekedar anak-anak saja, tapi orang tua dan masyarakatnya juga di-develop. Saya paham bahwa ini adalah cita-cita yang terlalu ngoyo-woro, tapi kalau kita kerjakan bersama-sama, mungkin saya yakin kita akan bisa ya memberikan sedikit kontribusi, misalnya kita aplikasikan di satu masyarakat dulu sebagai pilot misalnya gitu. Jadi kalau Bapak Ibu tertarik, monggo boleh meng-email saya di puji.rahayu@uiiacid, atau kalau misalnya kalau Bapak Ibu mendaftar dalam diskusi ini, saya mengirimkan reminder melalui email saya. Jadi itu email main email saya. Itu oke. Ini dari tanggapan dari Bu Suci, dari pengamatan saya di sekolah swasta internasional di Jakarta, gambar-gambar dan teks membantu pengembangan empati di kelas dan lingkungan sekolah. Oh iya. Jadi salah satu dari cara untuk mempengaruhi, cara untuk memasukkan nilai-nilai empati bisa dengan gambar-gambar dan sebagainya. Oke. That's a good point, Ibu Suci. Oh ini tadi dari Ari tadi nggih? Oke. Sama. Great. Ini saya akan membagikan layar. Apakah Bapak Ibu melihat ada satu anak ganteng dengan kepalanya dipin-pin itu?
Belum kelihatan, Mbak.
Belum.
Belum kelihatan.
Belum.
Oke, saya coba stop dulu.
Ya.
Oke, sudah kelihatan ya?
Iya, sudah.
Jadi anak ini waktu itu berumur 4 tahun. Anak ini waktu itu berumur 4 tahun, kemudian dia mengikuti uji coba dari penelitiannya Link tentang pembuatan aplikasi untuk develop empathy yang hasilnya atau maksud saya pengaruh dari kegiatan tersebut itu tidak hanya dilihat dari behavior saja, tidak hanya dilihat dari apakah kemudian anaknya melakukan apa gitu enggak, tapi dilihat dari pergerakan apa ya namanya ini dari apa yang terjadi di otaknya. Saya hanya bisa bilang seperti itu. Apa yang terjadi di otaknya?
Brain waves.
Ini brain waves ini ya, apa fMR EEG. Nah, ini pakai EEG. Jadi yang dilihat juga dengan di brain wave-nya. Kemudian dari pilot ini karena dilihat berhasil dan ada beberapa yang disesuaikan gitu. Kemudian empathy software apps lah ya, kita bilang apps ini dibuat dan diaplikasikan ke konteks yang lebih luas, yaitu di sekolah, 2 sekolah preschool di Australia. Hasilnya bisa Bapak Ibu baca di jurnal yang saya bagikan di bahan diskusi pada hari ini. Dan mereka, maksud saya Link dan Monash University masih tetap mengembangkan aplikasi ini. Yang itu sebuah keuntungan bagi Monash University. Waktu PhD, Link bekerja di Sydney University, kemudian Monash University tertarik, kemudian mereka menawarkan pekerjaan kepada Link untuk menjadi research fellow. Ya, untuk mengembangkan ini. Jadi sebelum Link lulus, Monash University sudah melamarnya. Begitu. Bapak Ibu yang tertarik untuk bekerja sama dengan Link, boleh meng-email langsung, atau kalau misalnya mau juga bareng-bareng untuk bekerja sama dengan UII, boleh nanti kita bicarakan. Itu mengakhiri pertemuan kita pada pagi siang hari ini. Kalau masih ada Bapak Ibu yang mau menyampaikan sesuatu, boleh dipersilakan. Kita masih ada 2 atau 3 menit. Kalau tidak, kita akan tutup pertemuan ini dan saya tunggu dulu deh setengah menit.
Bisa dari saya sebentar aja.
Nggih, monggo.
Ya, kebetulan ini adalah yang pertama saya mengikuti ya tentang ini kegiatan ini khususnya di Ibu. Tentu kami ada harapan terutama yang berhubungan dengan link, nomor HP-nya barangkali atau nomor WA-nya sehingga ke depan komunikasi lebih banyak barangkali. Ya karena kita tahu barangkali bisa lewat WA apa kalau ada kegiatan berikutnya. Ya sehingga ke depan lebih bagus lagi. Ini saya kira saya tertarik sekali ini untuk mengikuti ini. Ya bersyukur sekali terutama begitu
Terima kasih Pak
menambah wawasan
Buyung.
dan sebagainya.
Nggih. Kalau Pak
Ya, ya.
Buyung mendaftar, saya sudah punya alamat email Pak Buyung, nanti saya update terus untuk bulan-bulan berikutnya.
Oh ya ya, terima kasih banyak terima kasih. Tadi
Oke.
saya terlambat soalnya bergabung tadi.
Oh iya,
Hanya
Bapak Ibu.
ya setengahnya. Ya oke.
Inge.
Terima kasih
Bapak
banyak.
Ibu masih bisa mengakses diskusi hari ini lewat YouTube-nya PBI UII, nggih. YouTube PBI UII itu Salma bisa membantu saya untuk menuliskan bagaimana YouTube PBI, maksud saya PBI UII gitu nggih. Iya. Jadi saya akan selalu update untuk teman-teman Bapak Ibu atau semua peserta yang sudah mendaftar karena saya sudah mendapatkan emailnya. Tapi untuk nomor WA memang saya tidak bisa menjanjikan karena menurut pengalaman saya berhubungan dengan teman-teman di Australia, memang mereka tidak banyak yang menggunakan WA. Jadi komunikasi lebih lewat email itu jauh lebih cepat daripada komunikasi lewat WA. Jadi kalau kita misalnya saya memang mengetahui nomor WA-nya Link. Dan saya kadang-kadang menghubungi lewat WA, tapi saya mendapatkan kesimpulan bahwa menghubungi terutama Link lewat email itu jauh lebih cepat daripada menghubunginya lewat WA karena dia tidak selalu melihat WA gitu. Dan ada beberapa hal yang saya juga mesti mengikuti culture-nya teman-teman tentang membagi nomor handphone. Jadi kalau misalnya Bapak Ibu membutuhkan nomor handphone, saya akan tanyakan kepada yang bersangkutan apakah boleh dibagi atau tidak. Begitu mereka memberi izin, maka saya akan bagikan. Begitu Bapak Ibu, kita akhiri diskusi pada hari ini yang seharusnya kita membicarakan tentang how children learn, tapi empathy development salah satunya ya, empathy development menjadi lebih menarik, tapi kita tetap akan melanjutkan berdiskusi tentang buku How People Learn ini, yang pada diskusi berikutnya kita akan diskusi tentang mind and brain. Kalau Bapak Ibu ada ide untuk kira-kira apa ya yang akan kita highlight dari mind and brain ini, apakah tentang neuroscience in education yang sebenarnya sangat penting, tapi kita kadang tidak melakukannya, tidak menggunakannya di praktek persekolahan kita, gitu ya. Nanti bisa diskusi dengan saya tentang highlight apa atau spotlight apa yang akan kita gunakan untuk akan kita pakai di diskusi berikutnya. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu, terima kasih sekali sudah hadir di diskusi kali ini. Insya Allah bulan depan kita akan bertemu lagi. Nanti akan saya sampaikan lewat email, Facebook maupun Instagram, gitu ya. Jadi itu sarana komunikasi yang kami pakai. Kami menghubungi calon peserta diskusi bisa lewat email terhadap peserta-peserta diskusi sebelumnya. Bisa juga lewat Facebook, dari Facebook pribadi saya, Puji Rahayu Surasa, dan juga Facebook Pendidikan Bahasa Inggris UII. Juga lewat Instagram dengan nama yang sama. Matur nuwun, terima kasih, jaga kesehatan, selalu ingat 3M. Saya sendiri tidak ingat apa ya 3M itu.
Mencuci tangan, jaga jarak.
Mencuci tangan, menjaga jarak, dan menghindari kerumunan.
Kerumunan,
Semoga semua peserta diskusi ini sehat semuanya. Matur nuwun dan wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Matur nuwun, Mbak Putri.
Sama-sama Ibu.